for fast, cheap, and reliable Madden 21 Ultimate Team coins. Make sure you guys go check out my sponsor, Easy Mutt. Use code VENM at checkout for 5% off. Yo, what's up guys, VENM here, back with the video, and today we're going to be continuing our match defense series. I've been going over a lot of these throughout the last couple of months, I think, and this is going to be another new play that we have not touched up on yet. We've basically gone over almost every match play out of this big nickel over G. Just going to go in review of some of them that we did go over. We went over cover 4 quarters, cover 6 invert, cover 4 palms, cover 6 trap, and then cover 9. So we've gone through almost all of them. The last one that we have not talked about is going to be cover 6. Also, let me know if you want to see some new formations with match coverage. Kind of touched up in it 3-3-5 wide. But we're going to finish up in the big nickel over G. Hopping into our coaching adjustments. As you know, with match defense, if you're familiar with it, you do not want to set your zone drops to anything. Keep everything on default. And then again, you can keep auto flip off or on, whatever is your personal preference. Big nickel over G. I'm in the Giants defensive playbook. It's in 4-6. It's in majority of playbooks as well. And again, we're just going to run this cover 6 normal side, so you're not going to run it on the weak side or anything. Once again, I'm going to be running this gun bunch as I usually do against match coverage. Match typically is better against compressed sets. It can work against things like trips tight end, but trips, just spread sets in general, are going to be better against match coverage. So really, we're going to stick with this gun bunch. Also, before this video, make sure you guys do go ahead, hit that subscribe button. We're on the road to 20,000 subscribers, so make sure if you're not subbed to hit that subscribe button. Anyways, let's get straight into it. Out on the field, let's take a look at our player and talk about some of our personnel things. Now, I forgot to mention with the big nickel over G, you can get safeties at linebacker, and also I recommend getting some athletic defensive ends because we're going to do some man coverage. We're going to manipulate this cover 2 side of our cover 6 defense. Cover 6, of course, equals cover 4 plus cover 2. We have a cover 4 on the right and our cover 2 on the left. Now, naturally, we're going to go ahead and be using this vertical hook because, again, this vert hook is not a match zone. We don't want to user any of our match zones. That's going to create holes in the offense, pending you just perfectly follow it. So we're going to utilize the vert hook, user it. Let's talk about some of our adjustments that we're going to do. First things first, what I'm going to do is I'm going to utilize 2 adjustments. I'm going to man up 2 players. I'm going to man up X on X, and I'm going to man up our defensive lineman, this X player, on Christian McCaffrey. Now, if I want to, I could also spread my defensive line. Typically, it's better to have your defensive line pinched in big nickel over G because that's the way to actually shoot the run gap. You pinch and then you spread out or spread out. Yeah, you spread slant outside. Excuse me there. But so basically, all we did was we pressed. You could actually pinch your entire defense if you want to because we would pinch the D-line ideally. But you just made up those 2 different players. And that's going to be it for our first setup. The last thing you're going to do is just deep half A. That's adjustment that I've ran in basically every single match play in this little small series that we have done. So again, deep half. Starting out, we'll go with like some double post setup, something like this. You'll see that my assignment with my user is basically going to be anything that isn't matched up on. So for instance, the drags probably our assignment in this particular scenario. And then of course, maybe deep crossers, things like that. So I'm going to alert down. RB, he's going to be my guy to user, and you see it's pretty solid coverage there. We get a nice sack. Big nickel over G is a pretty good formation for getting quick pressure, I would say. Now, this could create kind of a couple of problems for us, and it's a little bit difficult to say. Certain route combinations will give this trouble. You have to be careful about it. For example, something like Z-spot should be defended relatively well. Basic setup, something like this, should be defended well. As far as things that could give it problems, maybe like weird slant to post combos. Again, it really just depends on the through receiver hook. This player right here, Adrian Amos, kind of depends on what he does, where you're using. So again, you saw, I think in that previous play, unfortunately, he did kind of like help out on Y. Again, not many people even run double post to begin with, but he actually kind of left open that deep receiver with Robbie Anderson. So again, be careful about that. But yeah, this is going to be our first setup. Let's run it out of Z spot there. And you see everything's defended relatively well. You might think A is a little bit open, but then again, that deep half should play it. If you're having a little bit of concern, a little bit of trouble with that, maybe you even do something basically like this, where I just decide to inside third him. so that there's no threat of him throwing a streak. Alright, now let's take this a step further with one more adjustment out of this stock setup. And I'm going to talk about some certain plays because, for example, a play like Flood is just really good against match coverage. For whatever reason, I cannot get that quarter flat for the life of me to ever match on. So we'll talk about some of the things that you might want to do against a Flood play. But for now, we're going to set up everything the same. Again, I do like this inside third adjustment against bunch. Against something like trips, I would be more reluctant to go against it, especially out of trips. You don't see a whole lot of passes just down the middle of the field. So I would probably leave the deep half depending on, a couple of variables. But for this next setup, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just add one adjustment. That's going to be with this defensive line. It's going to be a two-man rush setup, 2 blitzers, and then you're just going to put that D end in a vert hook. So again, it's relatively simple. It's kind of complicated with how many adjustments you have to do, but they're all relatively simple. You man up 2 players, you deep half, you inside third, and then you vert hook. So it's only around 5 adjustments. That basic setup's around 4 adjustments. So I don't think it is that difficult for you guys to grasp. Now, rushing 2 people, certainly not going to get really good coverage or really good pressure by any stretch of the imagination. Let's set up just a little smash return or a bench pivot type setup. See right there, coverage really well. Look at our outside quarter match perfectly, even onto that weird little tight end corner. And corner outs really aren't the problem. Really, the biggest thing is going to be with Flood. So let's just show that really quickly. If you see your opponent running Flood, he's just running Flood a lot. And I've tried certain things. I've basically tried everything you can do. I've baseline pressed. I've pressed normally. I put B in a hard flat. I just cannot get it to him to defend it properly. So my adjustment would be to go with something like this probably now. In this case, I still want some help on the outside of the field, so I'd probably put B in a curl flat or even a hard flat. Usually I'll do the stock curl flat because the stock curl flat's going to not play super deep, but he's also going to defend the flats. Really your biggest concern would be B on something, depending on if he matches. Honestly, if I wanted to, I could really hard flat B. Just depends on your opponent's tendencies. Again, that's a read you have to make based on what your opponent's doing. But this could be an option. Again, it's going to be less match, more just stock man-to-man coverage basically, but it would not be a terrible defense. And against Flood, you see how the coverage is going to be relatively well there. Now, for whatever reason, Adrian Amos did also run to the flat, so maybe you don't even have to put a hard flat on the field, but more times than not, I could even man up that D lineman on the tight end if I really had to. But let's talk about that setup again that I kind of sped past. I showed it once, but let's go into a little bit more depth. And again, all you're doing is setting everything up relatively the same way. And then you're just putting B in a vertical hook. Again, basic stuff. Let's go with Z-Spot again. Z-Spot, there's not too many popular setups out of this. Let's go with something maybe like this. Now, ideally, if you're running this, you have X as a playmaker. Maybe I should have put McCaffrey at receiver, but this is a decently popular setup, I want to say. And maybe people, I think, even use like a little bit of motion with this. They might motion Anderson out, kind of snap it right here. See, I'm going to use the slant. Now, this is one kind of thing that I've noticed gives me a little bit of trouble is like a just motioned out slant route. So be careful with some things like that. And it's honestly just like weird adjustments on offense that give match trouble. So one piece of advice I want to give you guys, do not run this every single play. You've seen Flood beat it. That was a Z-Spot setup that I run personally to beat match coverage. And it works relatively well. Now, not everybody's going to do that. Not everybody's going to know. Obviously, that's a route combo that's not super popular regardless. But it's just certain things with match you have to be careful with. Again, I don't see too many people just putting B on a streak anyways. And even if they do, I think this setup should be defended still well. Basically just from the slot. So if they just streak B from the slot, you see how everything's just defended perfectly. It's really just the motion that gives a little bit of trouble as Kevin King does Kevin King things right there. But yeah, so weird motion. Again, certain weird things, tendencies about match gives it trouble. That's something that you'll recognize and you'll learn as you use the defense more. So still try it out. Even if, you get dotted on your first drive. You want to go back to match. Maybe you just mix up your play calls. You go to man, you go to a little bit of cover 3, Mabel. Then you go back to match coverage. Again, don't run it every single play. Definitely would never advise you guys to run match every play. Unless, of course, it's working. And if he just doesn't have an answer for it, that would probably be your only kind of alternative to not running it every single play. But yeah, let's switch it up a bit. Let's go with just a unique type setup. I'll go with something like this. Create a little weird mesh post type setup, but we have the C route. So we're just going to motion him across. Right here, you see how that 3 receiver hook kind of lurks up on him. Look at B defended, and that is an outside quarter actually lurking up on the post. Terrible animation there, but again, Kevin King's only a 74 overall, so we can't really expect him to make a play like that. But you see, the flat was defended, the outside quarter didn't recognize anything, and that's one of the reasons the match is so great. It can pick up on things like that, and it will just confuse your opponent, especially from that standpoint. So let's just show it a couple more times. Let's go back to smash return. Let's run a setup kind of like this. This is a setup that I've ran a little bit before. Just a basically stock almost, but this setup, you know, weird setups can give match trouble. And honestly, if I'm ever struggling against match, I just try like weird type route combinations, especially if I don't have any other things to do. So sometimes, you know, weird route combinations can give it a little bit of trouble. You see here, it's defended pretty well and everything is backed. So majority of offensive route combos will be defended well by this match. Again, certain things like a motion out streak out of Z spot opens up the corner out. Again, if I notice like him running flood or Z spot and they're getting open every single play, then I can go with a man coverage setup. I can man him up and hard flat the defensive end. Anyways, that's going to do it for the video. If you guys did enjoy, please hit that like button. Subscribe to the channel for more, as always, and peace. I'm out of here.